word khasara. Okay? Like in Surah Nuh. وَاتَّبَعُوا مَنْ لَمْ يَزِدْ مَالُهُ وَوَلَدُهُ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. Not إِلَّا خُسْرًا, but إِلَّا خَسَارًا. So there's one word that's a variation of khusr. Another word that occurs in the Quran is khusran. Khusran. So you got three words now. You got khusr, you got khasara, and you got khusran. What's the difference between them, and what's the benefit of using khusr in this surah? First of all, let's talk about the word khasara. Khasara means a loss above a pre-existing loss. There's already loss, and you're adding to that loss. That is called khasara. If Allah had used that word, then we would have already been in trouble, and we're adding to that trouble. But Allah actually, by using khusr, a lesson we're learning is we're not in trouble. We're not in trouble, but we put ourselves in trouble. It's not like we were in trouble to begin with. So let's see how khasara, this word which means basically loss above a pre-existing loss, how it's used in the Quran. وَنُنَزِّلْ مِنَ الْقُرْآنِ مَا هُوَ شِفَاءٌ وَرَحْمَةٌ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ وَلَا يَزِيدُ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. وَلَا يَزِيدُ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. We do not increase wrongdoers in nothing more but loss. Wrongdoers, are they already in loss? Yes. And Allah increases them. You see the way it's being used? Then we find وَلَا يَزِيدُ الْكَافِرِينَ كُفْرُهُمْ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. The disbelief of their disbelief of disbelievers, it will not increase them in anything but more loss. Loss above the loss they already have. What's the first loss they have? Is kufr. Then what is the kufr above? The loss above that is the crimes they do against the believers. That's loss above loss. Their kufr was enough to send them to hellfire. But when they put the believers to trial, then they're digging their hole even deeper. So the word khasara is appropriate. Similarly, we find, as I mentioned in Surah Nuh, وَاتَّبَعُوا, and they followed مَنْ لَمْ يَزِدْهُ مَالُهُ وَوَلَدُهُ إِلَّا خَسَارًا. The one who wouldn't increase him or his wealth or his children in anything more than loss. In other words, they ended up following people that are losers to begin with, and following them would make them even more of a loser. Now, this is the first benefit of not using khasar in this surah as opposed to using khusr. But then there's the word khusran, very powerful word. Khusran is what's called sighatul mubalagha, hyperbolized noun in English, an empowered noun. This is also used in the Quran. Khusran means incredible loss, excessive loss, unimaginable loss. You have to empower the meaning of that word because it's got an at the end. When you put an at the end of a word in Arabic, it empowers it. Like you know how we say Ar-Rahman? It's not just merciful, it's incredibly merciful. When you say ghadban, it's not just angry, it's furious, it's enraged. So when you say khusran, it's empowered, loss. It's amazing amount of loss. Let's see how that's used in the Quran. Allah says, خَسِرَ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ ذَلِكَ هُوَ الْخُسْرَانُ الْمُبِينُ. He lost dunya and akhirah. That is ultimate loss. Isn't that the ultimate loss? What's so bad about that situation? It's not something light. He didn't just lose one thing, he lost both things. Ad-dunya wal-akhirah. So this is loss upon loss. This is the ultimate loss. Al-khusran al-mubin. Similarly, we find the word being used. Allah says, قُلْ إِنَّ الْخَاسِرِينَ الَّذِينَ خَسِرُوا أَنفُسَهُمْ وَأَهْلِيهِمْ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. The true losers are those who lost themselves and their families on the day of standing. That is the ultimate loss. So the real loss is not in this dunya, real loss is in the akhirah, the ultimate one. But nonetheless, there is loss taking place here also. But it's nothing compared to the loss that is coming. So because it's still loss, but not the ultimate loss, the word that is balanced and appropriate in this surah is إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. If it was in the hellfire, then what would the word be? The khusran. Lafi khusran, because that's the ultimate loss. You couldn't get any worse loss than that. So it's a perfect choice of word between the two kinds of words that are available to us. Now we're going to read something that Al-Bayhaqi rahimahullah comments on, something really, really beautiful in regards to this surah. He says, كَانَ الرَّجُلَانِ مِنْ أَصْحَابِ النَّبِي إِذَا الْتَقَيَا لَمْ يَتَفَرَّقَا حَتَّى يَقْرَأَ أَحَدُهُمَا إِلَى الْآخَرِ وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ. He says the Sahaba radiallahu anhum ajma'in, whenever they would meet two of them, they would never leave each other's company unless they would say to each other, وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ وَتَوَصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ. In other words, they would recite the surah to each other. They would recite it to each other before they would depart from each other. Why? They felt this is something extremely important to remind the other of constantly. This is not something you can learn once about and move on. And this is really what I want to spend the rest of our session today on. Is the difference between studying the Quran academically and learning the grammar of the words, the meanings of the words, the different qira'at, what the mufassirun have said, all this knowledge, all this information. When you get too tied down with the information and the technicalities, sometimes you lose the power of the message itself. In the end, Allah is talking to you and me. We should have all that knowledge. We should seek to acquire that knowledge. We should seek to have deeper understanding of the Qur'an. That is part of understanding the Qur'an. But we should never lose sight of the fact that in the end, Allah is talking to me like, somebody concerned about you talks to you, and somebody concerned about you gives you advice. Allah is giving you advice. And Allah is not talking about anybody else. He's talking about you and me. فِيهِ ذِكْرُكُمْ. In it is your mention. Allah is talking about you. He's not talking about anyone else. When you keep this in mind, we learn something about this surah. Talking about it is very easy. Talking about this surah and its demands is very easy. Internalizing them is very difficult. Extremely difficult. And that's the essence of the surah that I want to capture today, inshaAllah ta'ala. And we'll have a detailed study of each piece of the surah. It just deserves that much attention. It deserves that much attention. So we'll capture the essence of it, or try to capture the essence of it today, inshaAllah ta'ala. First and foremost, we talked about the difference between two things, success and survival. We talked a little bit about survival, but we didn't talk about the other thing, which is what? Success. Every single human being, in their head, they have an understanding of what it means to be successful. Every single human. Doesn't have to be Muslim. Every human being. Doesn't have to speak your own language. Every culture, every society, every man, woman, and child aspires to something that they consider success. For your kid, it may be getting a good grade. Success. For you, it may be a promotion or getting a job, or making a lot more money than you do now, or getting a certain car, or marrying a certain person, or buying a house. Whatever it may be, there's something in your head that you consider success. And there are some people you look at, and you don't even have to think about it. As soon as you see them, the thought that crosses your mind is, that guy's pretty successful. That one's pretty successful. How do they become so successful? In other words, you don't have to say it. It's in your head. And let me show you a personal experiment you can conduct. You're driving down a neighborhood, a fancy neighborhood, and you see a really beautiful house. Does your eye stay on it for a couple of seconds? Just, at least a couple of seconds. You may get distracted from it, maybe you even pull over. Whoa, that's nice. Because in your head, you're thinking, that person reached one milestone of success. It's in our head. That is something to aspire for. That's a kind of success. You're walking to the masjid from the parking lot, and you see a really nice car. Really nice car. Does your eye stay on it for a couple of seconds? Does the thought cross you? Look at the interior just a little more? Even navigation, wow, that's nice. The eye goes. It's something in your head that says, this has to do with success. Now, religiously, we can say, no, Jannah is success. Dunya is not success. We know that. I'm not talking about what you say. I'm talking about what goes on in your head. When you look at stuff. When you think about stuff. And kids are a lot more honest than we are, So I did this experiment with kids. And this is true of all of us, really. But I did this experiment with kids. I said, okay guys, if we're walking down the street and we see a guy who's homeless, he's living in a cardboard box, right? And next to him is a gate, and in the gate there's a guy who lives in a mansion. Really wealthy guy. Who do you think is successful? What do the kids say? Honest answer. They said the guy in the mansion is successful. The guy who's in the cardboard box is a failure. The one who graduated high school is a success. The one who dropped out is what? A failure. The one who won the election is a success. The one who lost is what? A failure. We measure success and failure in these terms. The one who got the job is a success. The one who lost the job is a failure. The one whose business thrived is a success. The one whose business tanked is a failure. This is how we measure success and failure. It's normal. It's totally normal to think like that. But we are learning something very, very radical in this surah. We are learning that all of these are not the measures of success or failure. Having a lot of wealth, having things that you want to aspire for, having them is no sign that you're successful, and not having them is no sign that you're a failure. They have nothing to do with success and nothing to do with failure. Now look, let's take some ancient examples. You know how I don't know if they still have the show. I saw it at a friend's house one time. They called it Celebrity Cribs. I don't know if you've ever seen it. But they go to famous people's homes and show you their homes. They're like the custom multi-million-dollar homes and stuff. Well, think about this. Who had the celebrity crib in ancient Egypt at the time of Musa alayhi salam? Fir'aun, huh? You could see his house from miles away. I mean, that's some pretty good architecture. It's still around. Right? It's pretty solid foundation. It's a world monument. One of the wonders of this is his crib. And yet, is he a success? One of the biggest examples of failure. When somebody's been able to save a lot of money, we say, this guy's doing okay. He's not in debt. He's pretty successful. He's got a good retirement plan. Look at Qarun in the Quran. Does he have a nice, big enough vault that people have to carry the keys to? Right? His vault is so big, forget the vault. Key has to be carried by multiple guards to go open the vault. SubhanAllah. But horrible failure. Then on the other hand, you have, if somebody gets deported from a country, you would consider that a failure. It's pretty embarrassing and humiliating, isn't it? Was Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam expelled, literally deported from Mecca? He was. If somebody doesn't have a home to live in and they have to live out in the woods, you know how in between your developments here, there's some patch of woods and some guy's living in those woods. You would call that a failure. That's pretty pathetic. Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam had to live in a cave for a stretched period. No food, no plate. Eating off of shrubs. Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. The greatest example of success, and yet he's living, and if you saw somebody living like that today, you would not think success. That's not what would cross your mind. If somebody gets kicked out of their home, they become homeless. It's a failure. Ibrahim alayhi salam. Does he get expelled from his home? He does. And yet, one of the greatest examples of success in human history. What are we learning from these examples? We're learning that the way we think about success and failure is not the way Allah wants us to think about success and failure. It's completely different. And then when we start rearranging our thinking, we learn something very critical about the society in which we live. And all of this is the message of this surah, by the way. In this society and in the world today, there are certain things that are defined as success, and you are told that is success over and over and over and over again. In other words, the wrong definition of success is bombarded at you constantly. You cannot so much as turn your computer on, and a banner ad will show you what kind of car you should get. And based on your searches, these are the stores that want to give you, a discount. And the billboard will show you what kind of house you should buy. Advertising in every way, shape, or form being pumped towards you. Even among our parents and our elders, among our youth, what college you should go to, what kind of job you should get, which neighborhood you should move to. Constantly we are being told what is success, what is success, what is success. Over and over and over again. And even if something is wrong, but it's said to you over and over and over again, what starts happening? You start believing it's true. You start getting affected by it. If constantly people around you are telling you and convincing you that such a thing is success, then the other thing that happens is if everybody thinks that's success, I must be crazy to think no. If somebody says, Brother Nouman, this is an interesting concept, but nobody thinks like this. You have the right to say, nobody thinks like this. Seriously. Get real. That's exactly right. Just because nobody thinks like this, we have assumed that it's invalid. If this was so true, everybody would think like this. But the thing is, what we're learning is truth is not sweet. Truth is bitter. And it's not about any action yet. I'm not telling you about any actions. We're just talking about a change of attitude. An attitude towards this worldly life. That's all we're talking about. A change of attitude. This world has nothing to do with success. This is not to say, by the way,